Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil khalqi wal mursaleen Sayyidina wa Habibina wa Shafi'ina wa Qudwatina wa Qurrata A'yunina wa Nuri Qulubina wa Sanadina wa Moulana Muhammadin sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathiran kathira. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the choicest of blessings upon the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Just a reminder to myself and the brothers and sisters is that we have entered into the first 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah, and it's important for us to acknowledge, it's important for us to realize how great and valuable these days are in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in an authentic tradition that there are no days where good deeds and good actions are more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where good deeds and good actions are greater in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. You know, and what that means is that, and you shouldn't mention this to Mullah Muhammad Qah, but this week's class is better than last week's class. And this week's class is more beloved to Allah than last week's class. Because we're in the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. May Allah accept our deeds and our action. May Allah allow us to increase in good deeds and good action. I feel very, somehow or the other, even though I don't appear to be, but I feel very energetic this evening. You know, I just feel better. Actually, what happened is that I started trying certain aspects of Tim Noakes' diet. You know, so I just feel better. I'm sleeping better, I'm walking better, I just feel better about myself. And what you should ask me is that how long have I been trying this diet? And I'll answer the question for you. I started this morning. Will Allah accept, inshallah? The Quran said, "Kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum." And I think we made reference to this in the previous classes when it comes to our children, is that we need to eat wholesome food. And that's what's important. But as how we need to be focused on our physical bodies, and as how we need to focus on physical food, there's also that spiritual dimension. There's spiritual food that you and I need to be aware of, and as how we focus on feeding our children food which is wholesome and good for them. Similarly, we need to take care of another dimension, and that is their spiritual food. And our author this evening, he begins, and the chapter heading that our translator has given for this section of the poem is developing the intellect, adherence to the Quran. So he comments on this particular verse of the poem where the author Al-Imam Shamsuddin Al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala states, فَيُلْزِمُوهُ الدَّرْسَ لِلْقُرْآنِ فَإِنَّهُ عِلْمٌ عَظِيمُ الشَّانِ. He should make him adhere to the study of the Quran, for it is knowledge of mighty status. He should make him adhere to the study of the Quran, for it is knowledge of mighty status. I think for me the most important thing in this line is we need to teach our children to love the Quran. We need to make our children understand that this Quran is revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to make them understand that every word herein is Allah speaking to us. You know, for many children, they struggle in understanding exactly what is the Quran. So all they know is they must learn alif, ba, ta, and tha, and jim. And eventually they start reading the Quran, and everyone is happy and excited when he enters into the Quran, and we perhaps bake him a cake, but we're not really giving him the essence of what the Quran is. We're not really sharing with him what the attachment of a believer should be to the Quran, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the initial stages, remember, he made reference in the verses that Mullah Muhammad Qah commented on last week, is when the child reaches now the age of tamyiz, he's able to distinguish between right and wrong. So prior to that already he can start reciting the Quran. but his mind has perhaps not reached a point or developed to a point where you can impress upon him the importance of the Quran, the nature of the Quran. So teaching him the Quran at this point, when he reaches the age of tamheez, where he is able to distinguish between right and wrong, that is not just teaching him to recite the Quran, it's more than reciting the Quran, because he should have started reciting and learning to recite the Quran from a younger age already. Right? So this is something more. We need to teach him extra rules of tajweed, perfect his recitation of the Quran. We need to start impressing upon him certain sciences related to the Quran, the ulum al-Quran. We can speak to him about what is meant when we say a surah is Makkiyah or a surah is Madaniyah. So just by way of example, and to maintain the spirit of interaction, who can tell me what a Madani surah is and what a Makki surah is? See that? I almost thought he gave me the right answer upstairs now. So what is a Makki surah? Now many would say that. Many would say Makki means it was revealed in Makkah, and Madani would mean it's revealed in Medina. But it's wrong. Makkah means it was revealed before immigration, before Hijrah. And Madani means it was revealed after immigration. So even after the immigration, the Hijrah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a chapter was revealed in Makkah, is still called Madani, because it was after revelation. Right? So these type of sciences we can teach him. Further details of the tajweed of the Quran. Teaching him the certain rules of commenting on the Quran. There's just so much that we could introduce to him. And start developing his attachment to the Quran and developing his mind to know that from this age, his whole life is going to be revolved around the Quran. And the younger they start, the better. Because there's no limit to how much benefit a person, an individual is able to take from the Quran. Al-Imam al-Zarkashi, he said that, you might think that if he starts young, he might become bored later. But no, that's not the Quran. Not the Quran. Al-Imam al-Shatibi made reference in his Shatibiyya to this. That the Quran, the more you recite it, it doesn't wear out. Boredom never settles in. It's just an ocean that has no end. So Imam al-Zarkashi described this beautifully when he said that يَزِيدُ عَلَى طُولِ تَأَمُّلِ بَهْجَةً. The more you ponder and look into the Quran, the more the beauty of the Quran is apparent, becomes apparent. And then he says, كَأَنَّ الْعُيُونَ النَّاظِرِينَ صَيَاقِلُ. It's as if the eye that looks into the Quran, every time it looks into the Quran, it's as if the eye polishes it further, so it shines more. The beauty just becomes more and more apparent. So this line is, attach your children from young to the Quran already. When they reach the age of 6, 7, 8, already start attaching them. Not just afternoon madrasa, go there, you don't know what's happening, come back and alhamdulillah, you feel that you've done your duty towards your child because you went to an afternoon madrasa. No. One of the most beautiful quotes that I actually heard in this regard was from a local scholar, Moulana Ali Gouda. He made a beautiful statement. He said, every child deserves the opportunity to memorize the Quran. Every child has that right. And how many children have been deprived? Right? So this is not a class where you and I look back to our parents and say, if only my father did so, or if only my mother did so. Your mother and father did such a great job that you're sitting in the masjid today, that you have iman, and you need to thank them and pray for them, and whatever good you're doing is going to be recorded in their account. But we shouldn't be looking, in retrospect to our parents. We should look at the new generation, the facility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us. Because there wasn't so many madrasas once upon a time. There wasn't so many hifz school once upon a time. Right? So Allah has made it so easy for us today. And what am I doing with these opportunities that are lying before me? So every child deserves that right. Every child is not going to become a hafiz of the Quran. That I can tell you from the outset. Not everybody is necessarily hafiz material, if I may put it as such. But it doesn't mean that you have to deprive him from trying. Be it a year or 2 or 3 years, let him try. And if he doesn't manage to memorize the Quran, no time was wasted. How can it be wasted? He spent his time reciting the Quran. He spent his time developing a connection to the Quran. And the important thing over here really and truly is selecting proper teachers for your children. The only way you're really going to get there's two things. The one thing is selecting a proper teacher. And the second thing is you yourself have to be a good example for the child. So how is the child going to develop a connection to the Quran if he never sees his father reciting? Or he never sees his mother reciting the Quran? We should actually be more particular in reciting in the presence of our children. It doesn't matter if they're going to make a bit of noise or jump on my back. They need to grow up seeing that my parents are reciting the Quran. There's no better lesson in life than teaching your children with your own action. If you attach yourself to the book of Allah, then similarly they will do the same. They will do the same. So, you see it, I saw this in my home, how you come home and, while this is perhaps not with regards to reciting the Quran, but Salah. So I come home and I had children from younger age, they start imitating us in Salah. They start making ruku and sujood, and sometimes they're not facing the Kaaba, sometimes they're facing, I don't know, Hollywood maybe. But the point is they're already making sajda and they're doing ruku, and as the effect that the parents have on the child. Actually, I used to think to myself, I wonder who's having a greater impact on this child. Is it the mother or the father? I used to debate with my wife, Perhaps it's me, it could be you. But there's actually a lesson that I want to come to over here. And who needs to be the greater role model? And who needs to take greater care? So I'll tell you who had the greater impact in my home. When my wife was pregnant, and she reached a stage where she could no longer prostrate and on the ground, and she had to pray sitting in a chair. So I saw my child also sitting and praying. So I knew it was not me. But the point there is that the greater responsibility in this regard lies with the mother. The mother has to be the better example. The mother has to be more particular. If you're going to do your ibadah, do it intentionally in front of your children, so that they can grow up in such an environment and they can develop attachment. So the parent is the one part. The other part is selecting suitable teachers for your parent, for your children. Thus, again, we tend to be very, very neglectful in this regard. I say this with a sore heart, and I don't want to point a finger at any individual. But you have Hifz schools and Hifz teachers, and the child comes home from the Hifz school and he can tell you that my Hifz teacher has a girlfriend. And I saw a photo of my Hifz teacher's girlfriend. Or my Hifz teacher was, this weekend, Sunday evening, he went to the bioscope with his girlfriend. Now, I don't want to point the finger at anyone, right? We should really look at our own faults and not at the faults of anyone else. But the point I'm really coming to is that at least know who the teacher of your student is. I know of one case where the Hifz teacher happened to be smoking dakha with the students. Now, again, we're not pointing a finger at anyone. That very teacher may be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than you and I. That very teacher might be his relationship with Allah might be better than you and I. But the point is that know where you're sending your children. Know who the teacher is. We tend to be so particular when it comes to secular studies, but we negligent when it comes to deen. The closest madrasa is the best madrasa. Whatever is convenient. I can't go to another school, that is just a bit awkward for me. I'm not going to see that, perhaps over there, my child's going to get a better Islamic education, because to me, Islamic education is just the same. Yes, when it comes to secular education, one school is going to be better than the next, and I'm prepared to pay extra fees, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You're more than welcome to do so, and secular education is important. But we're saying, develop a similar care for the Islamic studies of your child. فَيُلْزِمُوهُ الدَّرْسَ لِلْقُرْآنِ You should make him adhere to the study of the Qur'an. فَإِنَّهُ عِلْمٌ عَظِيمُ الشَّانِ Because it is a science, it is knowledge of mighty status. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminding us of the hadith of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that man shaghalahu al-Qur'anu an dhikri wa mas'alati, that person who is so preoccupied with Qur'an that he does not have time to make dhikr of Allah, he does not have time to make dua to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I grant this person better than that which I grant those who ask me. So the one who's so busy with Quran that he doesn't have time to make dua, Allah grants him better than that which Allah grants those who are making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah said, وَفَضْلُ كَلَامِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, the merit and the virtue of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, عَلَى سَائِرِ الْكَلَامِ, over all other forms of speech, is like the merit and the virtue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over His creation. Like no one can compare himself to Allah, no words can be compared to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the important things when it comes to the study of Quran with regards to ourselves and our children, and more this evening our focus is more the children, is that they need to start developing the etiquette of the Quran. The etiquette of the Quran. And I think we've become so neglectful on minor issues. So Al-Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he has a book called At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran. The book has been translated, and we don't have any copies in our bookshop, but we should be getting soon, inshallah ta'ala. But it's a very important read. At-Tibyan, which is the explanation regarding the etiquette of the carriers of the Quran, students of the Quran, by the great scholar Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. And one of the points that Imam Nawawi, really the whole book is filled with jewels. So I can't really pinpoint anything, but our author here has mentioned a few. And the first that he mentions over here in the translation that you have before you is that you need to look for the best possible teacher. And the best possible teacher is going to be the one who is the best role model for your child. You need to... The student must look to his teacher with the eye of respect, he says over here. So the student must respect his teacher. He must love his teacher. His teacher has to have such a way with the student that there is love between him and the student. That is just so important. That is just so important. But the point I was really coming to with regards to Tibyan and things that we are neglectful of is things such as making sure your mouth is clean before reciting the Quran. You know, who does that today? Who does that today? Before Salah even, making sure that you rinse your mouth out because you're going to be speaking to Allah. And how do you speak to Allah with a mouth that is not clean? A mouth that was not rinsed. So in sitting and reciting the Quran, the etiquette is that I should be facing the Qibla. I should be seated in a calm position. I should be cut off from the world and be focused on the Quran that I'm about to recite. I should have wudu. I should use the miswak before reciting the Quran. These are all minor things. If I bring them into my life, then my reverence and respect for the Quran grows. You know, and I just become a better person altogether. I want to move on to the next line, where our author and the title by our translator over here, Developing the Intellect, Keeping the Mind Busy. He says, the line that Imam Shamsuddin al-Ramli mentions over here, أيضا وشغل شاغل قلب الصبي عن كل ما يوجب نقص الأدب. Also busy the heart of the child from that which leads to reduction in manners. Busy the heart of the child from that which leads to reduction in manners. What's he saying? Keep your child busy with good things so that the child does not get engaged in such activity that is going to lead to his destruction, that's going to lead to a reduction in his manners. So the child doesn't engage in such activity that will cause him to pick up bad manners, bad etiquettes, bad ways. So it's a very interesting thing. The line said also busy the heart of the child. And when we speak about the heart, many a times it's used synonymous to the intellect. At times the heart is used synonymous to the intellect. So it's all about busying and preoccupying the child with things that are beneficial to him. And the thing that comes to mind over here, and the translator actually addresses it, is television. Is that something that we want our children to be occupied with, yes or no? It's a very challenging thing, and different views have been expressed. The problem with television these days is that for parents it's a way out. If the parent wants time for himself, he puts on a movie for the child, or he switches on the television for the child. But we don't realize how much harm television could be at times to our children. Especially, I was reading an article that led me to a very interesting clip, and I can't play you the clip, but I can tell you about it, and you can try to find it yourself. As by a Dr. Dimitri. Do you know what is TED? TED. Right? It's all about new facts and new sort of revelations and so forth. So this Dr. Dimitri has a very beautiful clip where he speaks about television in early childhood and the harms of television. And I encourage you all to watch it. It's just unbelievable. And one of the amazing points that he makes really is he focuses specifically on the first 2 years of the child. The first 2 years of the child. He says that the newborn brain, the brain of a newborn child, on average, weighs 333 grams. Right? 333 grams. The brain of an adult, between the ages of the peak of the growth of your brain is actually when you reach the age of 20, more or less. So basically, what happens with your brain from the newborn stage, your brain will continue growing till you reach the age of 20. Then it sort of remains the same size for a good couple of years, and once you go over the age of 40, it starts decreasing in size. Did you know that? That's why some people over 40, they just go crazy. Their brains are going smaller. No offense to the aunties and putas here. But, so, the ultimate growth of the brain, I forgot to record that, but it's going to be just over 1,000 grams. Something like 1,300-400 at most. Right? But the growth of the brain of the child from newborn to 2 years of age grows from 333 grams to 999 grams. That's almost the size of the brain of a full-grown individual. That his focus is the rapid growth of the brain in these 2 years means that this is a very important phase when it comes to the growth of the brain of a human being. And therefore you need to be very particular how that brain is stimulated. If the brain is stimulated in a negative way, and he actually has a whole lot of experiments, how he took lab rats and had similar lights as television playing to them all the time. And he looks at the characteristics of those rats after something like 60 days, which would be the equivalent of 2 years in that rat's life. More or less, you'll have to check for yourself to get the exact numbers. So the characteristic of a rat that was kept under these television lights for approximately 4 hours a day, which happens to be the average amount of television that a young child is watching in America. 4 hours a day. And then they take this rat and they run a number of tests with this rat compared to a rat that was brought up in a normal environment. And the differences are just remarkable. One of the differences is that a rat, by his very instinct, he tends to keep alongside his wall. It's like a protective mechanism for him. So he keeps along the wall. So they put the rat in the box, and they have the rat, a normal rat. 90% of the time, he stays to the side of the box. He runs right around, but he stays to the side of the box all the time. And very rarely does he come from the side of the wall into the middle. even though it's natural for them to come to the middle of the box at times in search of food, but very rarely. Whereas the rat that grew up in the environment, similar to that of a television, he doesn't have that safety within him. He's much more reckless. The child becomes much more reckless if he grows up in an environment where he's watching television all the time, because his brain between the ages of 1 and 2 is overstimulated. So they put that rat in the box, and you'll find that 50% of the time, approximately, he's attached to the wall, and the other time he's just running all over the show, which is completely not the normal attitude of a rat. And the point we're coming to is that you can watch the video yourself or not, but this is now scientifically proven that for your child to be watching television between the ages of newborn and 2 years is detrimental to his brain. They have statistics of children not performing well, having issues with being attentive in class, not getting good results, and a whole list of problems. And it all traces back to the upbringing of that child. So the author is saying here that one of your duties is to occupy the child's mind from a young age with things that will not lead to reduction in manners. So you need to think of ideas how children can be occupied that will be safe for them. And it's proven that the television is not good for you. It's not good. And the problem again, unfortunately, comes to the parent. Because the parent wants to be free, the parent doesn't have time to spend with the child. The best solution is just put on a movie, put on a cartoon. It frees them from the child so they can do whatever they want to do. And I can appreciate and understand that at times it's very difficult, especially for our mothers. Children can be very difficult at times. But that's the challenge. As the mother and sometimes the father, that is the challenge that Allah has given you. Allah has given you children as your duty and responsibility to see to the upbringing. Who said it must be easy? If bringing up children was easy, then you would have a whole lot of angels walking around today and there wouldn't have been problems in the community. But there's challenges. And bringing up that pious child, our Prophet ﷺ said that that child will continue benefiting you even after you die. That's the reward. If you make the child the hafiz of the Quran, the child will take you out of Jahannam. That's the reward. So yes, it's difficult, and yes, it's challenging. We acknowledge that, we know that, but just think of what Allah has kept in store for you if you're prepared to make that sacrifice. So we need to get back to the basics. Back to the basics. Take out a few egg trays and give your children paint and let them paint the egg trays. Keep them busy with things that are beneficial to them. They're going to learn hand and eye coordination, and they're going to learn so many other skills by painting the egg tray. Add some wheels onto it and you have a car. Or whatever else you want to do, but be creative. Arts and crafts is something that is very good for children. Take them outdoors, into controlled environments, that they get in touch with nature. Speak to the senior Buddhas in this masjid, and they will tell you that most of their childhood was outdoors. They used to play, what is the thing called? Kindertjie. And drieblokkies. And what else? You must have one of those old Buddhas. Right? But my father, when he speaks to me about his childhood, it was about swimming in some dam that they're not supposed to swim in, and getting those dunnerbola from trees, and it just sounds so exciting. And today we've just become restricted to our homes, and all our children know is DSTV and Cartoon Network and computer games and Xbox, and that's their life. And if it wasn't harming them, that is one thing, but now we come to learn that it's harming them. It's making them less productive human beings. And this is what our author is speaking about here. Occupy them with things that are going to be beneficial for them. If you don't know what to do, search. Today you have Google. Use Google for something good and search ideas to keep children busy. And you will come up with so much things to do. And you just need to initiate them. One of the nice points the author actually makes over here is that before you want to get your children busy with arts and crafts, whatever the case may be, the child needs his daily fix of special attention. So you first need to sit with your child and show him the love that the parent should be showing the child and speaking a bit to him. And very soon the child gets tired of that. He needs it, but when you sit for him long enough, he gets tired of you. Now you just create some activity for him, and the children are creative enough just to continue by themselves. Also busy the heart of the child from that which leads to reduction in manners. أيضا وشغل شاغل قلب الصبي عن كل ما يوجب نقص الأدب. خير. The next line. The next 3 lines, the author has it a heading over here, developing the intellect, learning consequences. And Imam Shamsuddin al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَإِن ضَرَبْ مُعَلِّمُ الصِّبْيَانِ أو والد بعضا من الولدان فلا يكن مثل النساء يبكي ويشتفع بغيره ويشكي فعادة الشجعان ألا يذكروا كل الذي جرى لهم بل يصبروا. He says that, and if the boy's teacher strikes him, or the father or either of his parents, he should not cry like women or seek intercession through another or complain. I'll read it again. And if the boy's teacher strikes him, or the father or either of his parents, he should not cry like women or seek intercession through another or complain. Now, the obvious thing that's going to come up here is that, and if the boy's teacher strikes him, how does Islam view corporal punishment? How does Islam view hitting children? I'm sure you must have given some thought to that in the past. And everybody has that concern about his child always. You know, is his teacher being unfair towards him, yes or no? So, the author, Shaykh Abdul Aziz, the translator, rather, Shaykh Abdul Aziz Ahmad, he takes a stance here that is not necessarily in line with traditional understanding. The traditional understanding would be as how the scholar Imam al-Balfaqi stated, that hitting a child is neither completely forbidden nor required except in extreme need. So basically, the traditional understanding of hitting a child or giving him a beating is such that it is permissible when there is a need to do so. That's the traditional understanding. Now, when does it become a problem? When does it become a problem? Why is it that the West has gone the way of prohibiting corporal punishment? Why is a parent not allowed to hit his child today? Or a teacher for that matter? It's because we weren't able to stick to this advice. The hiding should only be in extreme need, number 1. Number 2, the hiding has to be a balanced one. It has to be a balanced one. And the problem we have is that for some reason or the other, certain adults, they can't appreciate what is balance. So they overdo it. They take emotions out on children. You know, child abuse is something physical child abuse is something that has become very prevalent within communities. And one can't really blame a government just for prohibiting it altogether. Because how does the government draw a distinction between an individual who knows how to monitor corporal punishment and an individual who don't know how? Government can't do that. But government sees children coming with broken arms, and really these things, we don't see it. We are oblivious to it. Especially our Muslim community. We sweep everything under the carpet. No one must know. But it's happening. It's happening sometimes within our own families, and we wouldn't know. I have a friend, and I'm sorry to mention this to you right now. You know, but he tells me he went through a terrible experience where his kids used to play with cousins, and eventually, without his daughter was, I don't know, something like 7 or 8 years old, she was raped by a cousin of 13 or 14 years old. On several occasions, both vaginal as well as anal. So where does that come from? So you know what? That's the one part of it. That's the one part of it. The second part is that he goes to the clinic where his daughter is being tested. And it's a non-Muslim nurse. And the nurse tells him, he came there one evening and they did tests on her and they confirmed that she was raped. And she thought it was a game. She's innocent, she doesn't know what's happening. She thought they're playing some type of a game. The point is that this nurse tells them that this is the 10th case for this afternoon. The 10th case for this afternoon. So he's asking her, is it what type of background people are experiencing this problem? And then the non-Muslim nurse tells him that a large amount of these problems come from your Muslim community. But you just cover things and throw it under the door, and the perpetrator gets away with murder and nothing happens. So I don't blame government when government institute law and says that there's no such thing as corporal punishment. Because people have just lost it. And that's another effect of TV, by the way. How does a youngster of 14 or 13 or 14 years old know about intercourse? What does he know about anal intercourse, for that matter? He's 14 years old. Where does he get such information from? And that's what happened, again, coming back to television, if there's no control within a home. Right, so the government's stance on corporal punishment with regards to children, I can appreciate it fully. And while I don't necessarily side with the translator fully, in that there's no place for corporal punishment within Islam, I feel there is a place, but I feel there are better alternatives. The only hadith that I'm aware of that make reference to hitting children is the hadith where Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Muru awladakum," the hadith narrated by Amr ibn Shu'ayb and Abihi and Jaddi, that "Muru awladakum bis salati wa hum abna'u sab'i sinin." Instruct your children to pray salat when they reach the age of what? 7. When they reach, instruct. Do you know, in the Shafi'i school, it's compulsory upon you to instruct your children. And if you don't instruct them to make salah from the age of 7, then you are actually sinful. In the Shafi'i madhab, because the Prophet said, he gave a command your children to pray salah from the age of 7. If you fail in the duty of instructing your children to pray, whether they pray salah or not, that's not the focus right now. The focus is commanding them to do so. If you don't command them, you are actually sinful. You are athim. And then Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ أَبْنَاءُ عَشْرِ سِنِينَ. And hit them if they don't pray when they reach the age of 10. So that's the only reference really made to hitting a child, but already the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking about hitting. Now, it only makes sense that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is a prophet of mercy, a prophet of rahmah, when he speaks about hitting, and we understand prophetic words to mean upon the literal meanings, unless there's a reason to not understand it upon its literal meanings. There are times when hit them could mean something else. Like a translator, he says that to him, what وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا, hit them when they reach the age of 10. To him it means that you should place more emphasis now upon them to be praying salah and not a physical beating. Whereas I feel that there's no need to move away from the literal meaning of the text if there's no clear reason to do so. So I say yes, a beating is in its place. But it has to be a beating of what? A beating of rahmah, of mercy. A beating of compassion. That should be the idea behind hitting a child when there's a need to do so. Islam will never acknowledge and permit the type of beatings that led government to ban corporal punishment. There's just some teachers who really lose it. They just lose it completely. Right? So it's a to me the beating is there must be a need, a real need, extreme need, as the scholar Al-Balfaqi stated. And on top of it, it needs to be balanced. And most of the seniors here, again, they're going to agree with me that a good hiding is sometimes the best remedy for a situation. Sometimes it's the best remedy. Allah. So where are we? And if the boy's teacher strikes him, or the father, or either of his parents, he should not cry like a woman. So what he's saying over here is that if you are going to be hitting the child shouldn't start shouting and crying as how a female would cry. Because there are going to be certain things, if a female was to do it, it's acceptable. But for a male to do it, it won't be acceptable. So even if he receives a hiding, beyond the hiding, you need to continue nurturing him, not allow him to react the way a female would react towards a hiding. And that's what he's basically saying there. You should not cry like woman, or seek intercession through another, or complain. Al-Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the things that he states is that a male youngster, part of him being shuj'an. Shuj'an would be Shuj'an is generally a brave person. And braveness is a quality that a male should have. You know? And part of braveness is that when you are punished for something that you have done wrong, you acknowledge, you maintain it within. You don't shout and go about running around crazy. No. And you don't go around complaining to other people all the time. Part of a male's build up is that he keeps things to himself. He doesn't constantly go around and complain all the time. That's two essential different qualities from male to female. A male, when he's sitting with a problem, he keeps it to himself and he thinks, how can he solve this problem? You know, this is one of the reasons why husband and wife tend to clash many times. Because a lady is constantly, her way of solving a problem is speaking about it. A man's way of solving a problem is he keeps silent. He keeps silent and his mind starts working. Whereas a female, the way she solves the problem is she speaks about it. So when the female starts speaking about the problem, the male doesn't want to hear it, because his way of dealing with the problem is keeping silent. But he's not appreciating that a female works different and she needs to speak about it. So your job at that point in time is just to listen. And the more you listen and the more she speaks, the more the problem is solved on her side. And she becomes happy. And then you can reflect in your mind later to find out how you want to solve the problem. But the first problem is keeping the wife happy. Once you achieve that, now you can think of a proper solution how to solve the problem. So he's just speaking about the way of a male and a female. And you need to ensure that your child, your son for that matter, receives the upbringing of a male. And he doesn't exhibit qualities of a female at a young age. Allah. He had some interesting, his fourth section, as we mentioned in the past, is where he presents questions and expects answers for those questions. So the question he has here is that what role does hitting children play in discipline and child development? So he says you have to consider that we are training our children. This is one answer that comes from the person's name here is Tricky on Ummah Forum. But let's just see what Tricky has to say. You have to consider that we are training our children. They know nothing of the world or how to behave. If you start a new job and do something wrong because you haven't grasped everything, you wouldn't expect a smack off your boss. Would you? Then why hit children who are learning? You explain to them what they have done wrong and explain the correct way to do it without smacks or violence. Praise them when they do right and don't reward bad behavior. Emphasize the good behavior, not the bad. Now, whatever she's saying over there, it's in its place. We don't disagree with that. That's the initial stages of disobedience, and that's the way you need to interact with it. A hiding is not the first resolution. Hiding should not be your first choice. The hiding is only when things become extreme, and again, when you give it, it has to be a balanced one. I personally, my personal experience, when it comes to learning, is that a hiding is not beneficial. I didn't find hiding to be beneficial for me as a student. You know, I'm speaking about the hifz madrasas that I attended. Hiding did very little to motivate me to want to study and learn. And I found something to be much greater than a hiding, in motivating me to want to know my work the next day in madrasa. And you know what that is? And I feel this is a lesson that we should try to implement. We should try to implement. And this is my personal experience again. I was doing my hifz by Sheikh Ismail Lond. And we practically never got hiding. Practically never. And you know what was the worst thing to me as a student? Because if the teacher interacts in such a way with the student that there's a love between the student and teacher. So the student loves his teacher. His teacher is his role model. You know, the last thing you want to do is upset your teacher. And what would make me cry, is if I come to madrasa, I don't know my work, and I made my teacher upset. When I made him upset, it would make me cry. And that was far more effective than getting a hiding for not knowing work. Right? But how does it happen? The teacher must interact beautifully with the student so that the student would feel like that. And the teacher expresses the fact that he's upset or disappointed. You know, and I found that that was like the greatest impetus for me to know my work, is that I don't want to upset my teacher. Right? So I feel that is something that we should try really to implement, those of us who are involved in teaching and so forth. The next section, and I'm going to touch on this briefly and then leave the rest for Mullah Muhammad Kaur. It reads, developing the intellect, the need for relaxation. The need for relaxation. Islam has a, this is really something, you know, most of this book is a learning experience, right? And I don't claim to have all the answers with me right here. I think many of these things one needs to discuss. And as you go along and through the process, your opinions might change. But there's Islam's way of learning and teaching is that when it's time to study, you study hard. When it's time to play, play hard. There's time for that. Time for studying is serious time. Time for playing, do what you want. In this section is basically telling that the guardian or parent of the child must ensure that he gives the child time to play. He can't study all the time. Right? Whereas the latest trend within the West is what? Montessori. And Montessori is all about what? What's that now? Learn and play. Or learning through play. Or however you want to construct it. So the child plays and learns through his playing. Right? Which is it's a very successful method. However, when I gave this thought earlier, I was telling myself that the learn and play method is successful. But till when is it successful? Only till when the child reaches a certain age. And when the child reaches a certain age, you can't learn play any longer. Now when it comes to studies, you need to be serious. And when it comes to play, then enjoy yourself. So I'll read the 4 lines that the author has here, comment on them slightly. And I'm sure Mullah Muhammad Kaur will comment on them further next week. He says here that وراحة الصبيان بعد المكتب أن يأذن الولي لهم باللعب فإنه عند الصبي محبوب وقلبه أيضا به يطيب وكثرة التعليم موت القلب ويذهب الذكاء وبعض اللب فيطلبون للخلاص حيلة تنجي من التعليم أو وسيلة. There should be relaxation for the child, for the children after study, when the guardian allows them to play. For it is beloved to the child, and through it his heart becomes sweet. I'm going to read that again, right? There should be relaxation for the child after study when the guardian allows them to play. For it is beloved to the child, and through it his heart becomes sweet. Yatibu doesn't necessarily mean sweet. Yatibu is more pleasant. His heart becomes happy. That's how I would prefer to translate it. Why is it so important to give a child a chance to play? Because the human intellect is just like that. It cannot continue doing strenuous work. There has to be a time where you can just free your mind. There has to be a time where you can just relax. So the beautiful example that is generally quoted here is the story of the wood chopper. Do you know the story of the wood chopper? There were 2 wood choppers. The one who chopped wood, both of them thought that they're chopping wood. Wood chopper number 1, after 2 hours, his blade starts becoming blunt. So what he does is he stops chopping wood, he begins to relax, and while relaxing he sharpens his blade. Right? After sharpening his blade, he goes back to chopping wood and he chops wood at a fast pace. He is relaxed, his blade is sharp. Right? The other wood chopper, he is more serious. He doesn't rest. He chops wood without taking a break. His blade is becoming blunt, but he's just going on and going on and right? So at the end of the day, who chopped more wood? The Zadik now wood chopper must know. Who chopped more wood? The one who sharpened the blade. So relaxing is sharpening your blade. Giving the child time to play, he's just sharpening his blade. He's going to be more productive that way. And therefore it's so important to always give children breaks. They need breaks to free their minds, to relax a bit. One of the discussions the author is going to bring up here, sports. Is sports something that we want to introduce to our children, yes or no? The answer is very simple. Of course you want to introduce sports to your children. The problem locally is that many a times the environment at sports fields is not conducive for your child. So rugby is the good thing. Rather than take rugby is going to be a more challenging one. Soccer is the good thing, yes. But who's his friends at the soccer club? What is the talk that go on at the soccer club? Right? What happens there? So how many bad friends does a child many a times pick up at the soccer club? You don't know the background of anyone there. You don't know who their parents are. And in your mind, you imagine the child is just going to play some soccer. But today playing soccer is no longer playing soccer. It just has so many bad elements attached to it. My father was known for sports. Right? If anybody knows my father here, he will know that he was a good cricket player and was a good rugby player. That's what I'm told. Western Province and I think South Africa, coloured South Africa as well. But when we grew up, he didn't allow us to play sports. In fact, I played sports for a club for about a quarter season. That's actually an amazing story. I played rugby. I was flanked, by the way, for Rangers. My father wasn't very pro the idea, but nonetheless he said, go ahead. Well, I don't know how whether he knew I went to go play or not, but that's besides the point. I played one game. I played a second game. The first game I played, I was sitting on the line most of the time. The second game I played, I got injured. After the second game, we went for Umrah. Made tawaf and visited the grave of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Came back home. The season was complete, and it was presentation of trophies. Presentation of trophies. So after playing on the line for one game and getting injured in the second game, I got Sportsman of the Year. I'm dead serious. I got Sportsman of the Year. So it's either because my father was a good rugby player and I got Sportsman of the Year, or the other thing might be I think my father sponsored the drinks for the functions. But just being introduced slightly to that environment as a youngster, I could see so many negatives. So many negatives. I'm not saying that your children shouldn't be playing sports. I think it's a great thing. And if you're going to allow them to play for a club, you just need to be involved. Involved to the point where you can ensure that they're not meeting wrong friends, that they're not doing wrong things. A child cannot be left to his own self. Don't think for a moment that my child is good. He won't do anything bad. That's where you make your first mistake. That's where you have no idea what peer pressure is. You have no idea what it is. And any child can be tricked into doing wrong. It can be and if you find it so many times, the best of families you find the children going wrong. Because you don't, it's not that you don't trust your children, but the environment is so tricky out there. It's just so tricky and challenging. May Allah protect our children from the fitna that is there. The author concludes, and I'll conclude with his translating his lines. وَكَثْرَةُ التَّعْلِيمِ مَوْتُ الْقَلْبِ. Too much teaching kills the heart. If there's no time for relaxation, no time for play, that will eventually lead to killing the heart. Causing sharpness and some of the intellect to be lost. Causing sharpness and some of the intellect to be lost. Thus they seek a means of escape to save them from teaching or find an excuse. If you don't give them a break, they're going to have to start lying to you. If you don't give them a break, they're going to have to start making excuses. So if the period goes too long at the madrasa, we have lengthy sessions in Strand. And also Diki, our cameraman. Diki is one of those beautiful examples where a senior gentleman takes time out to go study deen. Right? So he's becoming a scholar now at our madrasa, sitting in, I think in his third year of studies. But just think about it. I see it all the time. If the session is too long, it's just every period someone's going to stand up and say, "Can I use the toilet?" Right? It's just his mind gets tired, so whether he needs to use the toilet or not, he just says, "I need to use the toilet." And that's just a small example. But the point is that if you overload children, they're going to start making excuses. And then you're going to create dishonesty. You're going to cause them to start telling a lie. So you need to be, I think a teacher, I'm going to close my book, we're going to end now. But a teacher really needs to learn certain skills. You know, I'm involved with teaching. And there's a certain way how you need to somehow maintain the attention of a class. So every now and then just try to make a joke so people don't lose you. I'm speaking about these classes now, I'm speaking about back at our madrasa. So, I mean, if you look at Shaykh Muhammad Amin Faqir, he speaks of his days studying in the Haram of Makkah. Shaykh Muhammad Amin Faqir has thousands of stories to tell you. And all of them are beneficial. He's one of the jewels in our community. And I advise you to take as much advantage from him as you possibly can. You know, so he was relating to us one day, he says that used to be the practice of the great Sayyid Alawi al-Maliki. Many of Capetonians, you'll be familiar with Sayyid Muhammad Alawi al-Maliki, who was the teacher of Sheikh Siraj and Sheikh Ahmad Hendricks. Allah yarhamu, he passed away a few years back. But his father, Sayyid Alawi, was a man of a different caliber altogether. And he was a teacher of Sheikh Muhammad Amin Faqir. Sheikh Muhammad Amin Faqir used to attend the Madrasatul Falah madrasa in Makkah. And there, Sayyid Alawi used to teach them, the Muwatta Imam Malik. And at the same time, Sheikh Muhammad Amin Faqir used to attend his classes in the Haram of Makkah. In the Haram of Makkah. His classes used to be packed. People from around the world used to come and attend these classes. One of the amazing things about Sayyid Alawi al-Maliki was that the amazing thing is that his grandfather's name was Abbas. I'm going to do this now, even though I need to conclude, right? But I'll tell you why I'm going to do this. Because Al-Imam al-Ghazali stated that one of the things we need to teach our children, we need to speak to them about the pious of this ummah, so they can develop an attachment to the pious. Today we lost attachment to the pious. Today we just question. Today, the most silliest of things you hear. You know, today we have Sheikh Yusuf's Kramat, by way of example. Today youngsters are saying, why must you go to how do you know he was a pious man? How do you know he was a wali? Only Allah knows. What does it mean? How do I know anyone is pious? So it means I mustn't keep the company of nobody. I mustn't visit anyone also. Well, it makes no sense whatsoever. So must you just have ill thought of every person that walks on earth? I mean, you read the biography of some of the mashayikh that has passed on, it's just remarkable what is recorded about them. How true it is not for you or me to judge. We judge according to that which is apparent, نحكم بالظواهر. As for whether he was truly pious or not, that's for Allah to decide. But Allah instructed us to be with the pious. كونوا مع الصادقين. Meaning Allah instructed us to be with him. So imagine I go around saying, how do I know he's pious? So Allah is instructing you to do something that is impossible. No, you look at the outward actions of a man. And based on that outward actions, you consider him to be from the pious. As for his inner, whether he is truly pious from within, that's Allah's job, not your job. Nonetheless, I just got off track there now, but Imam Ghazali says that you need to speak to your children about the pious. Today we don't know anything about the pious of this ummah, so we can't speak about them. So now I'm going to take the opportunity to speak about, even though this wasn't my plan really, I'm going to take the opportunity to speak about Sayyid Alawi, very briefly. Sayyid Alawi's father was Sayyid Abbas, one of the great ulama of Makkah. Their family was known to be one of the great Maliki ulama of Makkah. Their family was known for that, and Sayyid Abbas was the head of that family. Sayyid Abbas, he couldn't have, for years he tried to have children. Who saw a picture of Sayyid Muhammad, the grandchild now, the teacher of Sheikh Siraj and them? Who was another amazing scholar. And his works that you need to purchase, buy it, read it, it's just unbelievable. But if you look at Sayyid Muhammad, you'll notice that he was a very big person. Our brother Hafiz Razin will know. He was a big man. His grandfather, Sayyid Abbas, was just so big. But his son, Sayyid Muhammad's father, the Sayyid Alawi that I'm speaking about, Shaykh Muhammad Amin Fakir's teacher, was very thin. He didn't look like his father, he didn't look like his sons. He didn't look like his family. And the amazing thing behind it is that Sayyid Abbas couldn't have children. His wife fell pregnant a few times and she lost. And he wanted a son. So he went to one of the Habaib, I think the Mufti of the Shafi'iyah of that time, some Attas from the Ba'alawi family. And he said, "Oh Shaykh, please make dua to Allah that I could have a son." And then this Habib al-Attas said to him, we have prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you a child, and he will be one of our children. In other words, he will be a child of the Ba'alawi family, not from the Maliki family. And 9 months after he received the glad tidings from that Habib, that scholar, his wife gave birth to a child. And the child didn't resemble him, not his father, not his family, it resembled the Ba'alawi family, the Attas. How you want to accept that is up to you. But it's just, for me, it's amazing. For me, it's amazing. I said Abbas used to narrate the story himself. And everyone could see that Sayyid Alawi did not look like his family. He looked like the Attas, Ba'alawi Habib. Right? Sayyid Alawi, throughout his life, his eyes never ever looked at a disbeliever. He was a remarkable person, of remarkable piety. And one of the beautiful things of these scholars that we're speaking about is that, and this is really for me, it just speaks of Cape Town ulama, is that being pious or being knowledgeable does not mean that you have to be serious. Right? So I remember the principal of the Madrasa Siraj Hafiz, when it's Abu Yusuf Nob, saying he must be a smiling Sufi, a happy Sufi, not a serious one. That was the scholars of Makkah. If you look at Shaykh Salih Habadi, exactly the same. Shaykh Salih Habadi was an unbelievable pious person, but it was just his nature to make jokes. Right? So Sayyid Alawi that was his way. So Shaykh Amin Fakir, and this is the point I'm coming to, how to keep the attention of students. He said he's giving a big dars, senior students from around the world, but so he sees people getting a bit tired. So he says, I must tell you something about the group of Arabs that went to, I think he said somewhere in Europe. Shaykh Amin Fakir tells us, I'm going to be honest, I didn't find it so funny, but he laughs when he tells the story. So he says they went to Europe, and it was freezing cold. It was freezing cold. And the guy couldn't go to the toilet. It was kept in a room that is like on a 3rd or 4th floor building. And I think they didn't know where the toilet is or something. So the guy decided to urinate outside the window. And no one knew about that. And he closed the window and went to go sleep. And then the next morning they came and woke them up, the great ulama of Makkah now. So wherever they were, so they asked him, what's happening? Why didn't you use the toilet? So he said, what are you speaking about? So he said, no, you're out the window. So he said, no, what are you talking about? And when he opened up the window, so it was frozen. So cold it was. Right, so now everyone laughs and then he just continues teaching. So I think a teacher needs to be very creative. A parent must be very creative with his children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq. May I accept our presence this evening. I'm sorry if I went over time, even though I don't think I really went over time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overlook our shortcomings, may overlook our faults. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to become suitable parents for our children. May Allah allow our children to get the proper nurturing from us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them and protect them from the fitna and the wrong that was in our community. May Allah grant us all pious offspring that will be the coolness of our eyes. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa bihadha al-qadr naktafi. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.